Imagine getting a keto guy and a plant-based guy in one room. Well, I interviewed the authors of this book. First of all, this is a great book, and I think you're gonna really love this interview. And at the end of this video, I'm gonna give away 4 of these books for free. I'm gonna pay the shipping costs, I'm gonna pay the handling costs. I'll let you know exactly how you can potentially get this book for free, but you gotta watch the entire video because I'll tell you at the end after the interview. So enjoy this video. Matt,
yes.
You mainly got started, or your primary mode of eating is keto, is that correct? That's what works best for you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then Wade, you're plant-based. Mm-hmm. My $1 million question is, you wrote this book. How on earth did you guys not kill each other? And how did you come to be able to write this book? Because this is what everyone wants, this book right here. But on a serious note, this is like everybody's dream on YouTube, is to get a keto guy, a plant-based guy, a paleo guy, a carnivore guy, a vegan guy, a zone guy, blue zone guy, get them all in a room and just tell us what to eat. So tell me the story of how this came about.
First of all, we almost killed each other.
Okay.
It was close.
Turns out we're both really resilient.
You both bounce when you fall.
Yes, I think we both had our individual journeys. I started doing keto when I was 16, so I'm 46. So 30 years of, we can get into the nuances, but started that at a time. Came home from school, my uncle told me I was fat. I'm like, okay. Did the Atkins diet, went from 190 to 147 in 6 months.
Wow, okay.
Worked.
Yeah.
Got into bodybuilding, started doing more variations of the ketogenic diet, like anabolic diet where you're doing carb refeeds on the weekend. I'll fast forward a few years and I met Wade. We were both really successful trainers, both achieving amazing results, not just with ourselves, but with our clients, doing completely different things. And sometimes we would fail. I remember there's one client where he was on a ketogenic diet and skin turned gray and he looked worse than he did before, and I didn't understand it. And Wade and I argued for a long, long time about, I was a keto zealot, he was a plant-based zealot. We were both sure that we had the perfect diet for everyone. Yeah. And then eventually we realized, well, there's individual differences. Some people have better genetics for certain diets. And every diet kind of works for a while, but we know that 97% of people fail with their diet. So as Wade, your journey.
I mean, I was in the bodybuilding world and grew up on Arnold Schwarzenegger and Dorian Yates and that whole epoch, and then eventually found my way to kind of the number one coach in the time, probably in the in the 90s, which was Scott Abel. And Scott Abel was more of a if it fits your macros type of camp.
Yeah.
And he broke a lot of paradigms on how he would address like refeeds and metabolism and things like that, which was really unique, and I think he did some great discoveries there. And then I had a lot of success at that, but then decided I would try and experiment with a plant-based diet as more of a inspirational component. I read some interesting books on teeth and digestive systems. I'm like, I'll do an experiment. Now, my belief was that if I was going to do a plant-based diet as a bodybuilder, as an athlete, I was going to dry up and blow away. And I can remember the visceral fear that inspired. And so I became really clear about how a lot of people feel fearful about a dietary change, or if they're going to do the right thing, or if this is going to have some catastrophic effect. And so I said, I need to embrace the fear and go through this. And I did a 2-week experiment, and then that went 2 more weeks. And then after a month, I said I was going to do 2 months. And then I just ended up on plant-based because it worked for me. And then everybody in the bodybuilding community got mad at me because they said, you can't possibly do that. So I was like, well, we don't know if that's true. So why don't I just experiment as a plant-based bodybuilder and find out what are the performance parameters around a plant-based diet, as opposed to just health or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was able to have a lot of success and went to world championships, and that's not using drugs or TRT or exogenous medications. And that's when Matt and I kind of got together and started comparing notes in the gym. Is like, okay, and coming from some of the old bodybuilding influences, I had fears around fats, for example, the therapeutic uses of fats, because those days it was like low-fat diets, high protein, high carbohydrates. And then on a plant-based diet, that's really difficult with essential fatty acids and getting enough protein. And so we had to start merging concepts and ideologies in a way to find universal principles that could be applied across the entire frame of dietary strategies, as well as the nuances that allowed someone to be successful on whatever variation that they felt most comfortable with or easiest for them. And that's been an evolution of 20 years.
One of the things I liked about your book was chapters 20 through 25. You actually broke down each diet, which was really very objective. And it was like you did the keto diet, vegan diet, vegetarian diet, paleo diet, raw food diet, all these different ones. And it was like pros, cons. Was it difficult to be objective?
There's not too many diets. I think we've done them all.
Okay.
I mean, we both had a raw food diet phase, and we've pretty much done every diet variation that's been popularized and come out. So it was relatively easy to know what the pros and cons were, because we did them long enough to experience a lot of the cons. But what we wanted to do in those chapters was also give people the protocols, the suggestions, the supplements, the things to be aware of, because with every diet there's potential deficiencies, right?
Yeah.
In a plant-based diet, there's certain nutrients you need to be more mindful of. Same thing with keto. And I think every diet can work. One of my neighbors, Dr. Eris Latam, he's been on a raw food diet for 37 years. He's 73, I believe, looks phenomenal. And he's been able to make it work. And he's got Jamaican genetics, and it works for him. So again, every diet can work, but you got to find the one that works for you. And I think for people that are not sure where to start, which is obviously a very common thing, I think if it fits your macros is one of the best strategies.
So explain what that means.
Yeah.
In terms of like the proteins, the carbs, and the fats.
So essentially, you create a calorie target and a macronutrient target. So how many grams of protein, how many grams of fats, how many grams of carbs, how many grams of fiber. And if the average person increases their protein intake, increases their fiber intake, naturally they're going to eat less carbs, less fats. Why? Because the satiety that you get from protein and fiber naturally reduces hunger. Of course, GLP-1 agonists has become the hottest drug on the planet for a reason, because it works, but you can achieve maybe not that level of satiety, but when you increase protein and fiber, and maybe I'll cue Wade up here in a second, because he took his fiber to an incredibly high level recently, it just reduces your hunger. It does. And there's a concept called net calories. So when you eat fiber, you only absorb about 50% of the calories. When you eat protein, because of the thermic effect of protein, you only basically, the net calories about 70%. So again, by increasing fiber and protein, you're less hungry, and your net calories tend to decrease. So Wade, maybe share your recent dietary strategy for the world natural Mr. Olympia.
Yeah, so of course, one of the big objections in a plant-based diet is it's difficult to get enough protein. And protein is often considered the king of the nutrients because of it takes a lot to digest it, so there's a benefit on the thermic effect just metabolically, and it's a slow digesting process, and it creates satiety so that you can maintain a calorie deficit if weight loss is your goal. Mm-hmm. On a plant-based diet, though, you don't have that much. And so what was the way that I could keep that satiety level without sacrificing that, making it easy to stay in that calorie deficit? And for me, that was just keeping my fiber high. So I would use extra greens and massive salad in the middle of the afternoon. Mm-hmm. And I have suboptimal genes on satiety, just so people know. So left on my own accord, I will overeat because I have a delayed response on the feeling of fullness. Mm-hmm. And so if you give me simple carbohydrates or like, chips or, something like fast food
You're
or
not
something,
stopping.
I can pack away 4,000 or 5,000 calories in an hour easily.
So now that
no
was in the
problem.
book at the end,
Yeah.
kind of talking about genetic different components.
Correct.
So you figured that out.
Correct.
Okay.
And so, we encourage people to look at their genetics because that'll give them a predisposition of where they might want to fall on which dietary strategy would be most likely, and also which supplements are going to offset the suboptimal genetics that they have. And that's why that supplement will work well for them, but maybe not for somebody else, like your spouse.
Right.
It'd be something totally different.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. And it's been very effective. At 50 years old, I was able to go to the World Championships successfully as a bodybuilder.
Yeah.
No TRT, no chemicals, nothing else. And I don't have the genetics for it. I'm not a genetically gifted athlete. It's not something I'm, attributing to, but it was something that I wanted to experiment and prove in the real world that you could do these things. Because I don't like talking about something if I haven't done it and haven't proven it.
97% of all people have trouble losing weight and then keeping it off. So there's what that means by default, 3% of people are successful.
Mm-hmm.
What are those 3% doing?
That's been a question I've been obsessed with since my early 20s. So first of all, I helped my best friend lose 191 pounds in 18 months. That's really what got me into this, because I saw the transformation, not just physically, but emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
He literally went from being a virgin to being married in a couple years.
Yeah.
It was just so inspiring. I'm like, okay, I want to help more people do this. And yeah, I've been always obsessed with like, why do so many people struggle? And it took us a long time to kind of figure that out. But let's start with genetics. And I'm going to give you a fresh take on genetics. And a lot of people say, well, I've got bad genetics. Technically, we almost everyone has bad genetics for weight loss, right? We're genetically programmed to overeat. We're genetically programmed that if we diet too hard, our bodies will fight back with ghrelin increasing, peptides in the brain increasing, muscle loss, metabolism dropping, all the things we covered earlier in the book. So, how do we overcome these genetic challenges, right? Because again, a lot of people will lose the weight successfully, but then regain it. And I think one of the big things is people don't realize that once they achieve their weight loss goals, they need another goal, right? First, one of the missing pieces for a long time was the reverse diet, where people would achieve a weight loss goal and then go back to normal and then regain very rapidly a lot of the weight they lost. And Wade maybe shared the 42-pound story.
Yeah, my first time I went to the Mr. Universe in 2003, extensive period of diet, hypercaloric restriction, which has metabolic impacts. And most bodybuilders are, they're offsetting this with hormonal augmentation. And I didn't have that as a bodybuilder. So when I came out of that, my hunger hormones were out of control. And I literally gained 42 pounds of fat and water in 11 weeks. I went from Mr. Universe to Mr. Marshmallow.
Yeah.
And that was my first wake-up call to what happened. And I was a guy that was always in shape. And finally I was able to identify with someone who couldn't control their eating and recognize that, how do I get this under control? And so that spawned us to really to recognize that there was things that I didn't know, even though I had a successful training business and I'm at the world's aesthetic premier event, and I'm like, wow, there's things I don't know. We found out about the microbiome, how your enzymes and probiotics work. I started looking at some of these fat components that he was introducing me to, the ketogenic diet, because I was following the old school bodybuilding, very, very low fats, and that had some really hormonal impacts and other challenges. And so I realized it's what you don't know that takes you out, and it's what you don't know that creates confusion. And so by battling back and forth and then experimenting with the other person's ideas, we were able to discover that. And so now today in bodybuilding, people create a reverse diet strategy as opposed to coming off a calorie restriction for an extended time. And why I'm using the bodybuilders, people might not identify bodybuilders. We have to recognize bodybuilders as what they've achieved. Is the worst bodybuilder in your typical local show is in better condition than most people will ever achieve in their other life. You have the entire range of people of genetics, you have the entire range of people, ages and everything else, and they all get in shape. So I think that we're doing a disservice by a public perception of the sport by identifying what are they doing right. And what bodybuilders are doing right is they understand boosting their metabolism while keeping their calories low. And the best athletes today, they reverse diet. In the old days, used to balloon up after the contest, gain 30, 40, 50 pounds after, and then go through a contest season. There was a series. But now with Instagram and social media, they realized, well, we need to stay in shape all year round, and they started developing the strategy of reversing the diet once you hit your contest weight. And so, well, most people are never going to do a bodybuilding contest. They can look at, okay, I want to be whatever that weight is. I'm a lady, I want to be 135 pounds, or I'm a guy and I want to be 160 pounds. You create a dietary strategy and get there, but like Matt was alluding to, you want to be able to say, once I get there, that's not the final goal. I need to train my metabolism to handle an increased calorie so I'm not suffering like I might have been on a dietary strategy, or I don't have to try and retain this unachievable state for an extended period of time where I'm reducing maybe social and emotional kind of eating components that are part of the culture of being a human. So we address those issues inside of the book, and not very many people are talking about
thinking
this.
that way.
Yeah.
Let's give you a scenario. So I go into a room with a patient. Patient's got type 2 diabetes. They're overweight. They're insulin resistant. If you were in the room with me, where do you guys start as a trainer?
For the blood sugar management is one of the most important things, not just for people who want to lose weight, but for health, right? We know that elevated blood sugar levels will age us faster. Mm-hmm. And my mother-in-law lost both feet due to diabetes, which, and we'll get into one of the products we've created, and she was a big inspiration to create that product. First thing is, if you just change the order of what you eat, you can lower your blood sugar. One of my favorite Instagram pages, and she's gotten quite popular, is the Glucose Goddess. And she's proven time and time again that just by eating protein and fiber first and eating your carbs last, you can lower your blood sugar by 20, 30 points. Same food. And that's an old bodybuilding thing. I remember, reading that 30 years ago in Dr. Mauro Pasquale's books. Like, if you're going to do a carb refeed, eat your protein, your fiber first, your fats, and then eat your carbs later. So that's a really simple tactic that anybody can do and get really good results.
That's step one.
Yeah.
That's everybody can do that.
Yeah.
Order of food.
But another thing, this just happened for my father, who had a cardiovascular event a couple of years ago, and he's always been able to kind of eat what he wants. He's always been a relatively in shape guy, but then his doctor says, well, his blood sugar's scaling up. Okay. And I went home at Christmas time and I watched him for a week, and I said, Dad, I can help you fix your blood sugar. He's like, what are you talking about? I said, here's what I want you to do. Change your breakfast from cereal to have bacon and eggs instead of that, wheat infused sugar thing that you're having. Yeah. And take a couple of these blood sugar tablets before each of your meals. Because his afternoon meal and his evening meal were fine, but he was screwing up his blood sugar right out of the gate at the first of the day, and that was creating this problem. And he did that. The doctor was going to put him on medications, and literally, he went back 2 months later, and that's all he changed. He changed his breakfast, added some blood sugar breakthrough capsules before to help him manage his carbohydrate load, because he's getting older. He's not his metabolism's not as robust. Yeah. And that was it. She's like, wow, what are you doing? She goes, well, my son told me to do this and do this. She goes, well, it's working.
Yeah. Same patient, overweight, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, insulin resistant. You're going to start there. What supplements do you start with?
Well, Wade touched upon it, and we have to be very careful what we say here because of the powers that be. We do have a product called Blood Sugar Breakthrough. I will share, again, with my mother-in-law, her blood sugar got up to 600 even on insulin. Like, she was so insulin resistant that the insulin was barely working anymore. Built the product, started using it, and we had to completely readjust her insulin dose because she was becoming hypoglycemic. I'll just let people make their own conclusions based on that, because there's certain things we just can't say. But there's a lot of really powerful molecules. Berberines obviously become a really hot supplement these days, which we use a stronger version called dehydroberberine, along with some other supplements that have a lot of really good research and data in terms of improving blood sugar response. So what we can say legally in terms of blood sugar support or blood sugar management, it's a very good product. Now there's a very simple hack that everybody can do after a meal, which is a brisk walk or movement for about 10 minutes. You can lower your blood sugar by about 20 points by just going and moving and literally utilizing that blood sugar or that sugar that's in your blood right after a meal. So if all you do is take, say, 2 capsules of blood sugar breakthrough 20 minutes before your meal, eat your protein, fiber, fats first, carbs last, and then go walk for 10 minutes, you'll have a massive impact on your blood sugar.
Oftentimes people mistake dehydration for hunger. And usually if you're dehydrated, you drink a sugary, fruity kind of drink. And I'm that guy, right? Like if I'm dehydrated or I'm not on point or I haven't eaten for a while, I want to take that sugary drink. And if I do that without having those kind of high satiety protein fiber meals periodically, I'm just going to keep riding that sugar train where you're going up and down, because once you go up, what goes up must comes down, and then you crash, and then you create that hunger cycle. So you want to think of stability over time, and if you're traveling or doing those things, is having those regular every 3 hours, like the old bodybuilder mentality was, hey, every 3 hours I'm going to have something with some protein in it just to keep that blood sugar stable, so I don't ride that roller coaster of blood sugar.
So since you guys have been in it for so long and you've basically written the final book on nutrition, where you see the future of nutrition going?
One of my favorite things to spend time thinking about is what's the ultimate. I think the ultimate is you do genetic tests, which we're about to release. The genetic test will tell you, again, which diet might work better for you. It'll tell you a lot of specific things that should be taken into account. But I think the ultimate is going to be everything's done for you, everything's figured out for you. So we also built an app called the Ultimate Nutrition app. You can go download it now. And we want to take the thinking out of it, because most people, they just don't have maybe the motivation to learn all the nuances. So we want to try to automate that as much as possible. I think the future of nutrition will be, again, the perfect meals crafted for you, delivered to your home. Of course, a lot of meal delivery companies, but they're not necessarily hyper-personalized and customized. So I think also farming will revolutionize back in the right direction. Obviously, modern farming has depleted the soil of minerals, and it's all been about maximum yield and all of these things. We're hopeful and confident that farming will be done properly, and over the next few decades we can get real food again that's full of nutrients, and maybe genetically modified food that's done the right way, where there's more nutrients. It's not just resistance to glyphosates, right? Things like that. So that's my take, Wade.
I think it's going to be personalized, localized, and specialized. And what I mean by that is your dietary choices will be very clear about you as the individual, and you'll kind of fit within that framework, and that may differ for your family, and that you'll be able to acquire high quality foods in your local environment, because with shipping costs, environments, and then also technology that's allowing us to grow large yield amounts in a very small area. And then the specialization is that regardless of almost any diet that you're going to follow, there are going to be elements that are going to be difficult for you to get from a regular diet, whether that's from the diet itself or that's because of a genetic mutation inside of your own genes that makes it maybe more difficult for you to absorb or utilize that particular nutrient. So you'll have specialized supplementation geared around the limitations within your own biology moving forward. And why am I confident that that's going to be the future? Because the people at the highest levels of health and performance are doing that now, and they're bonding together, and they're improving the technology, they're improving the science, they're sharing that information. And now, because of the internet, we're able to distribute that information to other groups in faraway places. So we're having little pockets of places of people that are coming up with kind of the same type of mentality and pooling their resources in a local environment. It's better for the environment. There's a community aspect out of it that's missing in the digital world, and there is a reconnection with what we're putting into our body. And I think the more that you become connected with what's going into your body, what's inside of that, and why that's good for you, the easier it is for you to follow that.
Do you think that's going to come from the performance people that are trying to maximize health, or do you think it could become almost a pharmaceutical thing where your primary care doctor will learn it? Because right now, most people are getting their nutritional information from healthy people.
Yes.
That's the ironic thing, is that most people, when you want to be healthy, most people find a healthy person and say, well, what do you eat, or what do you do? Mm-hmm. They don't go to their primary care doctor to get health information. You go to your primary care doctor when you have an ouchie or a bug in you to get treatment for a disease. Where do you think it'll come from? Do you think it'll come from the performance aspect?
No, actually, I think it's going to come from the family. I think it's going to come from emotional reasons.
Okay.
At the end of the day, it's going to come down to motivation. The performance community has always been motivated for an externalized goal, which is usually based on their individuality, and that's
winning an event or
achieving
like
a certain outcome.
Yeah.
But when I look at families, particularly parents who may not have been successful in their own journeys for however long they've lived, and they start seeing these problems come out of their children.
Yeah.
And I'm dealing with some families right now who have struggled dietarily to stay on it for whatever reason their entire lives. And now their kids, they're seeing the same problems that they've struggled with for 20, 30 years. They're having those problems, and they're like, they are motivated to do whatever they can to make sure that that next generation doesn't suffer everything they have. And they're making interactions and changes around that because they're emotionally invested the way the high performance guy. And I think that's what the medical community, I think that's what the marketing community has missed. That is the emotional drivers that allows a person to make the changes to overcome a sea of dysfunction.
Well, I really hope you enjoyed that. Matt and Wade were really super nice guys, and I learned a lot from this interview. Unfortunately, I had to edit it down. There was a lot of other stuff that we discussed that was not in the video, but that's where this book comes in. So I got 4 copies of this book. I'm gonna send this out randomly to some subscribers. Now, here are the rules. Number 1, you must live in the United States of America. I can't be shipping this overseas and paying taxes. Number 2, you have to be a subscriber. Put a comment down in the comment section, and then let me know what type of diet has helped you the most. Then you're gonna go to my website. My website is right here. And you will go on there, and there's a section for new patients where you can actually contact me through email. Just go on and highlight your comment, or you can rewrite it, send it to me personally on my email through my website. What I will do is collect all the different comments, and I will randomly pick 4, and then I will contact you. I'll just get your address, and I will pay shipping. I will pay for the box, I will pay for the book itself, and I'm gonna send 4 subscribers this book. I think you're really gonna enjoy it. If you don't win the book, then you can certainly go to the website, which is down in the description, and order the book. It is really a great value.